Hi, I'm Graham Blackburn, and this is Traditional Woodworking by Hand. And today we've got a rather amusing episode. It's called The Long and the Short of It. Hi, in my life I've made lots of things, big and small. And I have to admit that when I have big jobs and lots of pieces to make, then yeah, I've used machines and I've done what a lot of people do. But right now I'm most interested in non-electric woodworking. That means no plastic, no electricity. It enables me to work more safely, more quietly, and best of all, it gives me more opportunities to do fancy things that you can't do with machines. Today, I'm going to talk about the vast range of sizes of practically all the tools that I use, because obviously, depending on exactly what you're making, you might need something very big or very small, and you might not know how big the range is. I want to thank everybody before we start for having subscribed. That makes this channel possible. I also want to point out that if you go to my website, there you can not only find out how to take lessons from me, but you can also find all the books that I've written with very clear instructions on how you can get them. There are 5 books in the series that I'm currently selling, and this is the first one, and it's simply an encyclopedia of all the different tools of all the different woodworking trades have used up until we went electric. Now, here are some of the tools. Probably the first tool that you pick up is a measuring tool. Now, I have some measuring tools here, and as you can see, they range from really tiny little measuring tools. This is a little English 4-fold rule, to a much bigger 3-foot rule like this, also a folding rule, to an even longer straight edge rule like this. I think that's pretty astonishing to go from something this small to this big. That's measuring. That's the first thing that you do. What's the next thing that you do? Well, you might want to start scribing on something. You might want to start laying things out. So of course, everybody knows what a pair of compasses are. This is good for making little circles. But in woodworking, we have other tools. Here are a couple of points. I have them on a relatively short stick, but if I had a longer stick, you can see that this also works as a giant compass. Another example of how things can be either very small or very large. Probably the most astonishing thing is in the world of planes. Now, I use a lot of planes, and we've done a lot of episodes on planes, and we've talked about all the molding planes and the bench planes and the special purpose planes. But look at this. It's hard to believe that this little tiny object is a little tiny smoothing plane, and it's in the same family as this monster, a giant jointer plane. So you really can go from very tiny to very big with, I should point out, everything in between. And that's part of the fun, part of the trick of when you're planning on a piece that you're going to make, to know exactly whether you're going very large or very small, and to be aware of the fact that you have a big range of almost every class of tool to choose from. Where do you choose them from? I get asked this question all the time. It's true that if you go to the big stores like Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, you don't have much of a choice. But given that most of these non-electric tools were used for almost 500 years before we got electricity, you can rest assured that if you look online, if you Google old tools, or even if you look for new tools, you can find on Etsy and Amazon and eBay, you can find all kinds of tools, especially if you know what you're looking for. So from measuring tools to marking tools to planes, we can go on for a long time, but I want to show you a few other things. The next thing, probably the next big class of tools, is saws. Look at this monster and compare it to this little tiny thing. What's this? This is a giant miter box saw designed to be used in a metal miter box, but this is a big saw. This, on the other hand, which is just a little veneer saw, doesn't even take up 1/10 of the length. A wonderful example of the difference in sizes. When you measure things, after you've measured them, then you need to maybe lay things out. You might want to make squares. So most people are familiar with a framing square, although unless you're a carpenter, very few people these days can understand the markings. There are inch markings here, but there are a lot of other markings on both sides that tell you the angle of the rake and how much it should hold over and everything. But this is a pretty big tool, standard size. At the other end of the scale, here's a little tiny square, which I have to point out, I use a lot. When I'm sawing small pieces of wood, when I'm checking the size of things, I use one of these. And these, by the way, come in a whole family, all the way up with a lot of intermediate sizes up to a really big one here that's so big it needs a little pin to hold it on the work so it doesn't fall down. While I'm here, let me point this out. Even in the world of sharpening, you can go from a standard size sharpening stone, this is actually a Japanese binsui stone, to a little tiny stone here that's really useful for sharpening the insides of auger bits or very small chisels and things. So sharpening too comes in a huge range of sizes. Next thing that I'm looking at here, hammers. Here's a little tack hammer, very light, very thin handled, comes with a nice cross peen at this end. But look at this compared to this monster. If I want to drive a stake in the ground, this would get me nowhere at all. On the other hand, if I'm just trying to tack the corners of a frame, this is altogether too big. So while I'm showing you these extremes, I don't want you to forget, and you can find this out by looking in the book, I don't want you to forget that there really is everything in between. Here's another example, screwdrivers. Here's a little tiny screwdriver. Look at this. This is a serious screwdriver. So screwdrivers too come in different sizes like that. When you have things together, what's the next thing that you do? Well, very often you need to clamp things together. And of course, you can go from little tiny clamps like this, a little wooden jaw clamp. You can go all the way up to a clamp that's taller than I am. Plus, you can find clamps right in the middle, all the way along here. I don't have too much else to talk about, but I do want to mention levels, especially perhaps more useful in carpentry than furniture making. But if I want to make sure something is level, then I can use a standard 3 foot, 4 foot spirit level like this. It will measure level and it will measure verticality, but look at the difference between this and this. Now ironically, this is what's known as a line level, and you might think because it was much smaller than this, it was good for much smaller jobs, but actually the reverse is true. This has little hooks on it that you can hook onto a line 20 feet long. So you can use this little level, this little tiny miniature level, to make sure that something really big is nice and level. Perhaps the smallest level of all is the bubble level. All it is one little round circle with a bubble in it, and when the bubble is completely in the middle, you know that the surface of whatever it is that you're working on or that you've made is absolutely level. So I hope that was interesting. I could go on for a lot longer. There are a lot of other things, but there's one last tool that I want to show you. And this is probably the most boring tool in the shop, but it's also one of the most expensive and one of the most useful. It has no markings on it. It has nothing here at all except a small bevel. This is a level that's calibrated to be absolutely flat. It has a big warning here. I'll read the warning to you. It says, caution, this is a high-grade precision instrument and extreme care, underlined, should be used in handling and storing. Accuracy will be impaired if bent or if edges are disfigured in the slightest. It should be used in an area free from drafts and at a common temperature with work to be checked. So how about that for an unusual long tool with nothing on it? So I hope that was interesting. As I said before, if you want to find out more about the books and how to take classes, whatever, by all means go to the website. And remember that whatever you make, there is a wide range of tools to make it with. And you can find them by going online and looking. You can find from the smallest possible wooden wedge to a giant wedge, from the smallest little saw to the biggest saw. They're all out there, and it's kind of fun to choose the right size tool for the right job. So thanks for listening. Don't forget, if you haven't subscribe already, and good hunting for non-electric tools. Thank you.